and welcome to the farm. Did you know that a manufacturing unit needs to comply with nearly 70 laws and regulations and file as many as 100 returns every year? I'm not exaggerating because I didn't come up with those numbers. The government did, in an acknowledgement of how a complex regulatory environment, along with inadequate infrastructure and the unavailability of skilled manpower, have constrained the growth of manufacturing in India. And so, days before we entered the new year, the government announced a new, rather ambitious policy, the National Manufacturing Policy, at the heart of which lies the establishment of National Investment and Manufacturing Zones, or NIMZs. Now, an NIMZ is a greenfield industrial township of at least 5,000 hectares in size, managed by an SPV that's headed by a government official. It's meant to be self-governing and autonomous. It is meant to enjoy certain relaxations in labor and environmental regulations, and it will also be entitled to a few, and I underscore few, fiscal incentives. Industry has given the NIMZ proposal a warm welcome. Anand Mahindra tweeted, describing it as an initiative with vision and strategic intent. ITC's Vaisi Deveshwar called it one of the most significant developments since the economic reforms of 1991. He said the creation of National Investment and Manufacturing Zones will power a new paradigm of competitive growth in the country. CII President B. Muthuraman said NIMZs have far better and far more progressive policies than SEZs. The intent is noble, to raise the contribution of manufacturing from the current 15% of GDP to 25% and create 100 million jobs. The reception, as you can see, has been warm. Now it's all about the implementation, and that's where we often get stuck, don't we? Well, to find out if industry's expectations will be fulfilled, I'm joined in Mumbai by a guest who has deep expert knowledge of such policies, V.K. Jairath, former Chief Industry Secretary of Maharashtra, and joining me in Delhi, Abhay Agarwal, the head of the PPP business at EY. Gentlemen, to both of you, a very warm welcome. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Jairath. You know, to me, when a policy is designed by the center but meant to be implemented by the state, that's where the first challenge arises. Do you think that other such policies that have been designed by the center but meant to be implemented by the state have found success, thereby giving us hope that this one will too?
If you just see the recent policies which have been introduced by the center, where it involves both center and the state to implement it,
right,
the SEZ Act, the DMIC, what happens is the policies are very, very grand. I mean, I would call them grand policies. They have a vision, and like this policy has 100 million jobs, in the next 10 years. At the state level, there is a problem because, one, there is a problem between various ministries even at the central level.
Okay.
And then there are implementation problems at the state level. To give an example, the SEZ Act came up with a lot of announcements, and it was supposed to be designed on what happened in China, the growth story there.
Very ambitious, lots of fanfare,
very ambitious.
all of that. Yeah.
Now, there were a large number of projects which were approved. But when the act was being made, it did envisage that there would be a lot of concessions given on the labor acts. There would be other concessions. There would be tax incentives which would be given.
Right.
So the government of India announced it and then asked the states that you should implement the acts, and then you should go about implementing the policy. Actually, what happened is that, we know that in Maharashtra when we brought in the SEZ Act. Now, since you wanted to give concessions on the labor laws, so you had to go back to the Labor Ministry in Government of India, because the center was unable to persuade the labor ministries on certain concessions they wanted to give.
Okay.
So when you went there, the central ministry said, no, you have to make these changes. This is not acceptable. This is acceptable. And labor being a concurrent subject, there were central laws, there were state laws. So you came back, and finally you had to drop most of the provisions.
Okay.
Similarly, when you went into, there were other concessions or tax incentives, what happened? Later on, MAT was introduced, and then the whole regime of the direct tax code. So what has happened is that you have people now who've gone, invested, big developers who've gone, acquired property, acquired land, and then they are sitting with no takers.
Right.
So basically, you have a very grand policy, but you don't have, now the support either from the center or the state to be able to put it into implementation.
And the full consensus between all central ministries and all state ministries to be able to implement this effectively.
It just doesn't come about. I mean, if I were to go ahead and give an example, see, even the present policy envisages a concept of an industrial township.
Right.
And they've quoted Article 243Q of the Constitution. Now that provision has been there. Right? The state of Maharashtra had in fact amended the Maharashtra Municipalities Act and had designed for industrial townships. Okay. And you have MIDCs, you know, there are so many MIDC establishments set up in this state. But we could not bring in the concept of industrial townships despite an act being there.
Why?
Well, they said that there are gram panchayats, they would not be able to give up their revenues. The cabinet took a decision. So even today in the entire country, I'm told, I could be wrong, that except Jamshedpur, which came up in a different manner, there is not even one industrial township. And this act talks about setting up of industrial townships. So I don't know how it will come about.
Will it make it easier for this policy or this attempt to succeed, considering that the first 7 such NIMZs that they have identified are meant to be established along the Delhi-Mumbai infrastructure corridor, industrial corridor, and that corridor has been in the making now for 5-6 years. The assumption being that the land is already available, and that because that corridor is such an expansive, ambitious project that seems to have attracted the attention of several international investors, that maybe these 7, or at least a few of these 7 could be a success, and that could give this policy a huge leg up? No,
that's not true. Actually, we are presuming that land is available. It's not. Even in that DMIC, the proposal, you had to, it provided for setting up of investment regions and investment areas. Investment regions were about 200 square kilometers. So these are areas which have been identified as investment regions, which would comprise manufacturing zones, ACZs, and a whole lot of other such things, free trade warehousing zones. But I was reading that, the press statement says that in Maharashtra they've identified Dighi Port area.
That's right.
And they've identified
2 areas in Maharashtra
have
been
identified.
Yes.
Now there is no land available, and if you know the history of the coastal areas of Maharashtra, you're having problems in Jaitapur, you're having problems in 2 power plants which had been proposed in Raigad area. I don't see land coming there. On the contrary, you have other areas where land is already in possession of developers.
Right.
And you have land with them, but now because you have kind of fixed that the development will happen, or the NIMZs will be set up only in these areas, you actually have people who had acquired land with SEZs with no takers there, waiting that they should be converted into domestic tariff areas.
Okay.
And you have new land acquisition being planned, where again there's going to be a huge problem.
They're not ruling out any other area.